Red Hail by Jamie Killen was surprisingly entertaining and I had a really good time with it. Hello everyone, welcome back to A Fictional Escapist. My name is Kris and today's video is the Red Hail book review. This is a book by Jamie Killen and I would say that it is a sci-fi bordering on sort of first contact novel within that sphere. Red Hail is written in a dual timeline. We have the experiences of characters 60 years apart from one another, so 60 years in the past and then a timeline in the present, and it made this such a fast-paced and enjoyable read while we experience these two timelines sort of coming together. It all started with the Red Hail, a freak storm taking place in the small city of Galena, Arizona during the 1960s. 16-year-old Anza sought shelter from the wild storm that caused the roads to resemble a bloody flood. She hides out with an older woman, Dove, who had previously helped her with a medical situation, hiding it from her father. From this point, Dove and Anza are linked in the story as they try to figure out what is happening to them and their town. A series of plague-like symptoms take over, causing the people and the animals to exhibit strange symptoms. 60 years in the future, sociology professor Colin Ayres has spent his life researching these Galena plagues, deeming it a case of mass hysteria rather than an actual plague that happened in Galena. It's now in 2020 and he's almost ready to publish his thesis when his partner Alonzo starts to exhibit similar symptoms to the plagues many years before. It turns out Alonzo isn't the only one. Musician Sonia is called into her son's school after her son Dylan starts naming without warning, naming being one of the symptoms that happened in the 60s and is now happening now. Shortly after Dylan starts naming, Sonia starts experiencing this first sign of the plagues herself and experiences things like losses in time, and she's found to be suffering the same fate as all those years before. She finds the professor, contacts him, and wants to help in any way she can, desperately wanting to protect her son from what's to come from all those stories that she's read. Colin, Sonia, and Alonzo must race against time and an intensifying illness to stay ahead of the symptoms that caused the bloody riots 60 years earlier. I can't give too much more away in terms of the plot because we'd go into spoiler territory, even though the spoilers sort of happen towards the end of the book, but I want you to go in and experience it because it was such a fun and interesting time for me personally. Red Hail was a lot of fun. It was one of those reads that makes me wonder why I don't pick up sci-fi in this sort of subgenres. When I think sci-fi, my brain automatically goes to things like space operas and military sci-fi, which I do enjoy but are very heavy. Whereas this type of sci-fi, sort of along the lines of your Blake Crouch, your Michael Crichton, the science is there, but it is very easy to follow and very entertaining. So it did make me question why I don't pick up more of those types of stories, because this was very, very fun for me to read. My favorite aspect of this book was just how the story was told and how the structure itself allowed for the plague symptoms to become more intense and heighten the stakes for characters in the current timeline that we're in 2020. The reader experiences these Galena plagues as they occur in the 1960s and the new wave affecting the descendants of that town in 2020. We follow Anza and Dove as the naming, spasming, and trance-like stages of this disease rip through a small town and cause extreme unrest, and it brings things to the surface like underlying racism and religious affiliations, and that causes drama in itself, and just allowing the time that this was set in and the plagues to build up those stakes was really heart-racing at times in this book, and it was a lot of fun. Probably not for the people in the 1960s in this book. Probably wasn't as fun for them. By doing this, we got to see the way that this sleepy little border town jumps into action and tries to take down as many nodes as possible. They were conducting experiments and bringing in outside help to try and find the answers to see if they could prevent this from happening ever again if they weren't able to stop it in this instance. In our 2020 timeline, we get to see the connection to Galena made immediately by Colin, having spent a significant amount of time following these plagues and trying to prove it as a mass social hysteria case. We see that knowing what has occurred and having some idea of what comes next doesn't necessarily help the situation as people start experiencing these plague symptoms in the current timeline. In fact, it can cause more panic because we know what to expect next, and we're just fighting against time to try and make those things not occur. As the timelines sort of overlap, the reader experiences these same symptoms in the 1960s and also in 2020. I thought this was really well done, and it was a great way to build those stakes, even though we knew as the reader what was going to happen next. Another thing worth mentioning in Red Hail is the character work. Anza, our young protagonist in the 1960s, absolutely stole the show for me. She is someone who is coming of age. She is both scared of what's happening but really determined to help those around her and will not take no for an answer. She has to deal with teenage hormones, seeing her father panic and wanting to protect those around her, all while being willing to throw herself into the thick of it as an asymptomatic portion of the population of this time. I thought Anza was such a strong character, and if you do like those elements of coming of age, you are going to find that within this character. It was wonderful for me as the reader to see her develop into a young woman and then carry her knowledge into the future. Jumping timelines, Colin, Sonia and Alonzo were also really solid in their parts to play in 2020. I felt connected to them as a reader as they raced against this rapidly shortening timeline and made some of the decisions that I probably would have made were I in their shoes. While they were all very different, they showcased some really good teamwork and a team dynamic that felt authentic and relationships that felt authentic the whole way through. And I came away from the book hoping that they were still friends at the end of the day. Now, I did mention this is a first contact novel. Some people are turned off by that or they're anti-buzzwords. Please don't be. It's a very small part of this book and I would love to get into it, but that would be going into spoiler territory and we don't want to do that. So you'll have to read it to find out. But do know that this book is very much character focused. I wouldn't say it's a slow burn, I would say it's probably a medium burn because we are following two timelines that are sort of succinct with one another. It does read quite fast and it was very enjoyable. I'll say that normally first contact novels for me I'll be like, yeah, I don't really care about that sort of thing. But I will say that this one was not overly cringy, which can happen in this type of story. I thought like it definitely had its place here and it was enjoyable the whole way through. I had a great time with this one. Like I said, it did make me want to pick up some more sci-fi along the way and make me put some more in the TBR rather than just sort of sticking to fantasy all the time. So I'll be following this author and really excited to see what Jamie Killen puts out next. What do you think of Red Hail? Are you going to pick this one up? Let me know in the comments down below. If you like the content, give it one of those. If you want to see more of it, click subscribe at your will. I'll catch you in the next video. Ciao.